One of the hardest parts of menopause I hear women talk about is the quiet fear that you're losing yourself, not in a dramatic way. Says who? Menopause for me is very dramatic. It feels as if the backstage operations and the audience have all spilled onto the main stage at once. The curtains are open, the lights are blinding, and suddenly everyone is in the spotlight. Very loud characters, demanding celebrities, all wanting the lead role. Music crashing in at the wrong moments, costume designers racing past with half finished outfits. Lights flashing unpredictably, the audience shouting for drinks, different seats, better views. And there you are, the producer, standing center stage, sweating, forgetting, heart racing, while trying to keep the show running smoothly. The problem is that everyone used to know their place in the play. For years, they stayed in their lanes. They followed the script, and then suddenly they don't. This chaos erupts after decades of rehearsal, discipline, and preparation, after years of holding everything together behind the scenes. The show must go on, but how? No one really knows. How do you bring order to this kind of chaos? Menopause doesn't always arrive as a dramatic breakdown. Often it starts by pulling you back from things that once felt easy and automatic, things you did without thinking, things that used to work. Some people call this phase transitioning, others call it a change of life or a midlife crisis, and some call it an awakening. For me, it was all of it. It wasn't just physical changes, it felt like a whole life shift, not just a hormonal one. My body was mirroring something bigger happening inside me. The version of me that used to cope, juggle, and push through didn't show up the same way anymore. The first thing I noticed is that it was ripping the polite, patient, well mannered version of me away. My body stopped cushioning stress the way it used to. Things that were once tolerable suddenly became unbearable. People pleasing, overthinking, emotional suppression, ignoring my needs, none of it worked anymore. This felt brutal, but I later recognized it as a truth telling phase. The body forces honesty. Everything that had been kept under wraps over the years comes to the surface, and not in an orderly way. And when that happens, it's easy to assume something has gone wrong, that you're fading out of the most spectacular production called the naughty 40s or the nifty 50s, the so called best years of your life. You start to think you're losing your role as producer. What no one really talks about is how destabilizing that feeling can be. Because so much of who we are is built on how we've learned to function. And when that functioning changes, it can feel like the ground has cracked open underneath you. You're losing your footing, your grip slips, and there's nowhere to hold on to steady your balance. The old identity of who I am for everyone else starts to untie itself. Crying for no reason, walking into a room and forgetting why, loss of words mid sentence, feeling rage at something minor. And when that happens, a deeper question surfaces. Who am I without all the roles? You become more sensitive to what's happening around you. While medicine explains parts of this through nervous system changes and hormonal shifts, the lived experience often feels like heightened intuition, less tolerance for lies, including self lies, a stronger, angry inner voice, gut level truths that leave your mouth before you've had time to edit them. What once sat quietly in the background is now under a spotlight, magnified and undeniable. When the inner signal gets louder than the external noise, it can feel like an awakening, but a rude one. As estrogen and progesterone fluctuate and eventually settle at lower levels, the body stops buffering life the way it used to. Hormonal change affects the limbic system, which is deeply tied to memory and emotion, but it also influences mood regulation, stress response, sleep cycles, motivation, focus, and even how we perceive threat and safety. The first half of life for many women is about building, proving, coping, nurturing, and surviving. Menopause often marks the transition into a different phase, less about expanding outward and more about going deeper inward. I describe this as a move from achievement to meaning, from productivity to presence, from striving to wisdom, from taking care of others to self care. She has been hidden for far too long. This inner being was always there. She was bound and silenced to accommodate society and its rules, fitting in or being spat out. When she rises, the partners, the husbands, the children, the co workers, the friends, the family, and even the producer are shocked. But this fire force burns from the inside out. She's done waiting. And if I had been prepared, I might have noticed her earlier. I could have welcomed her sooner, tamed her gently before she burnt down the stage. I could have kindled her power and released it more slowly into the open. Menopause isn't taking me away from myself. It's stripping back what no longer fits. And I believe this is why so many relationships don't survive this phase, because it becomes a mismatch. The parts of ourselves we've neglected for years are no longer willing to stay written out of the script. Old grief, anger, fear, and unprocessed experiences can rise unexpectedly. While this is uncomfortable or unbearing at times, it can also be profoundly healing. Many women describe it as years of emotional backlog, finally asking to be seen and heard. That process can feel like a cleansing or a rebirth. That doesn't mean it's easy. It can feel painful, uncomfortable, and liberating all at once. But there's a difference between loss and transition. One is something taken from you, the other is something forming. If you feel unfamiliar to yourself, it's because you are evolving. That doesn't mean you're losing you. It may mean you're no longer willing or able to live disconnected from your needs. Across cultures, menopause has historically been viewed as a rite of passage, a move into the elder, the wise woman, the healer, the guide, the no nonsense truth teller. Modern society has lost many of these rituals, but the body still goes through the initiation. When there's no cultural container for it, women are left to interpret the experience on their own. So when women say menopause feels like an awakening, they're not being vague or mystical for the sake of it. They're describing a real overlap of biology, psychology, identity, spirituality, and meaning. The changes in the body bring about a reckoning. The reckoning invites awareness. Awareness opens the door to transformation. For many women, menopause is not the end of something. It's the beginning of living more truthfully, more embodied, and more aligned than ever before. If menopause has made you feel unraveled, pause before judging that change. This isn't about going back, it's about understanding who you are now and learning how to meet her with compassion. For me, that meant looking at what I was putting into her to become who she needs to be, changing what I eat, what I do for fun, how I take time for myself, strengthening muscles I didn't even know needed strengthening, looking after my mind, protecting my heart, coming home to myself, and thinking very carefully about not only who I allow into the second half of my life's journey, but who has the patience to walk beside me through this transition. This is like adult puberty for the rest of your life. I am now a Menoteen. I suffer from manners paused. I might get a motorbike and go on a wild ride, but I'm too tired. I am Marley, and this is how I navigate menopause.